The Soviet Union bore little resemblance to its portrayal in Western films. Forget those Cold War thrillers depicting every Russian trapped in a gray concrete dystopia, with KGB agents lurking in every shadow. The reality was far stranger, and in many ways, far grimmer. Picture waking up in a place where even your bathroom wasn't private, where toilets and showers were shared among 8 families. Each morning began with tactical planning just to brush your teeth without someone hammering on the door. This was daily existence for millions under Soviet rule. As you lie in your soft bed, steps from a private bathroom, let me sketch what life was like on the other side of the Iron Curtain. And hey, if you're enjoying this, drop a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from. Tell me your location and local time in the comments. It's wild to think people are tuning in from all over the world as they drift off to sleep. Now, let's travel back to the USSR of the 1950s. Buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. But first, get comfortable. Adjust those pillows, pull up the blanket. Trust me, you'll need the coziness. Congratulations. You've just woken up in a Soviet communal apartment in Leningrad, 1953. Stalin's corpse is barely cold, but his legacy suffocates everything. The air in your room bites with chill. Central heating exists, in theory. Your breath hangs in ghostly puffs. The thin blanket, weighed down by coats for extra warmth, has left your spine aching. Nothing like your plush, temperature-controlled bed now, is it? Your ears catch the symphony of communal living before your eyes even open. Pots clashing in the shared kitchen, a snarling debate over the last spoonful of sugar, a toilet flushing through pipes that shriek like tortured souls, a baby wailing next door. The pre-revolutionary walls are thick, but sound slithers through the flimsy doors in unpredictable ways. You're among the lucky ones. Your family has its own room, not an apartment, a single room. 150 square feet of living space where you sleep, eat, entertain, and stash every possession you own. Privacy? A bourgeois fantasy. You swing your legs off the narrow bed that moonlights as a daytime couch. Your parents stir on the fold-out against the opposite wall. The tiny table between you will soon be cleared for meals. Clothes dangle from wall hooks. No closets here. Space is too precious for such indulgences. Now, the morning's first battlefield, the bathroom. In a communal flat housing 8 families, timing is warfare. Too early, and you'll freeze. Too late, and you'll queue, risking tardiness for work or school. An unspoken schedule allots each family 15 minutes. Barely enough to pee, splash water on your face, and scrub your teeth. You grab your toiletries. Everyone guards theirs fiercely, and a towel. The door creaks open cautiously. No waking the neighbor's baby. An angry glare at this hour is the last thing you need. The hallway yawns before you, a dim tunnel lit by a single jaundiced bulb. The parquet flooring, once elegant in this pre-revolutionary mansion, is now scarred by decades of shuffling feet. Wallpaper peels like layers of Soviet history. The bathroom door's closed. Bad sign. You join the queue behind Dmitry Petrovich, the factory foreman from the end room. He nods, stubble catching the sickly light. Nina's in there. He grunts, referring to the elderly widow who takes forever despite having barely any hair to wash. 10 minutes already. You lean against the wall, resigned. This is normal. This is life. While waiting, you check the kitchen schedule, a makeshift system to manage dinnertime chaos when everyone fights for stove space. The kitchen itself is a study in Soviet contradictions. Private shelves in the communal fridge, personal cabinets for dry goods, a gas stove jury-rigged to accommodate 5 pots at once. Some families have installed their own hot plates to avoid the nightly skirmishes. Finally, the bathroom door opens. Steam billows out as Nina emerges, her wispy hair turbaned in a towel. She offers a curt nod. Dmitry gestures you ahead, a small kindness in a system where such gestures are lifelines. The bathroom is a study in austerity, a stained tub with a dangling shower head, a toilet with a chain flush, a sink veined with cracks. Miraculously, the water's hot today, a good omen. You race through your routine, eyeing the clock. 7 minutes. 8. Leave time for others. Back in your room, Your mother's already up, heating water on a contraband hot plate. The samovar, a family relic that survived revolution, civil war, purges, and the Great Patriotic War, what Soviets call World War II, stands ready. Hurry, she says, not unkindly. Your father's already in the bread line, part of the daily choreography. 3 times a week, he rises before dawn to queue at the bakery. Fresh bread is one of Soviet life's few reliable pleasures, kept cheap by the state, if you're willing to wait. Today, he'll bring extra for the Novikovs down the hall. Tomorrow, Mr. Novikov will return the favor. These unwritten pacts are how people survive. Your mother hands you a mug of strong black tea and a bowl of kasha, buckwheat porridge sweetened with a precious sugar spoonful. You eat standing up, the ritual so ingrained it's automatic. They say oranges might be at the gastronome today, she mentions, referencing the state grocery 3 blocks away. I'll try at lunch. Oranges. The word alone feels exotic. A burst of color in Leningrad's monochrome winter. They appear rarely, these golden globes from Soviet Georgia or beyond, their scarcity making them treasures. If secured, one will be saved for New Year's, still months away. You drain your tea, grab your coat. Heavy wool, function over fashion, and face the day. A final check in the cracked mirror by the door. Clothes clean, presentable, though style is irrelevant for Soviet workers. Utility trumps aesthetics. Outside the apartment, the stairwell reeks of cabbage and tobacco. The elevator, a 1930s relic, has been broken longer than anyone remembers. You descend 5 flights, footsteps echoing. The street greets you with a slap of cold air. October in Leningrad is the overture to Winter's Symphony. The sky's the color of wet cement. A misty rain falls, not enough to cleanse, just enough to seep into your bones. Pedestrians hustle past, collars up, heads down. The tram stop swarms with workers. When the tram arrives, already packed, you meld into the human slurry, bodies pressed together in anonymous intimacy. The tram rattles through the streets of Leningrad, its iron wheels screeching against worn tracks like a metallic echo of the city's weariness. Past the grand imperial buildings now carved into communal warrens, past the hastily erected Brezhnev Era blocks thrown up to house the displaced, the city unfolds as a layered cake of history. Baroque spires stand shoulder to shoulder with constructivist workers' clubs, while Stalinist wedding cake architecture looms over it all, frosting thick with socialist realism. Through fogged windows, you glimpse the morning rituals of a Soviet city. Queues already snaking outside shops. Women clutching empty string bags hoping for a miracle delivery. Orange-vested street sweepers pushing yesterday's debris into gutters. Propaganda posters plaster every blank wall. Smiling workers over fulfilling quotas, their faces glowing with state-approved enthusiasm. The reality inside the tram is different. Faces etched with resignation, bodies swaying in silent endurance. Another day at factories where initiative goes unrewarded, where meeting the plan matters more than actual productivity. Yet there's security in this grind. Everyone has a place, however humble. Everyone has work, however meaningless. The system provides, even as it suffocates. At your stop, you elbow through the crowd with muttered "pardon," "s," and stepped-on toes. The Kirov Works sprawls before you, a mechanical city within the city, its smokestacks belching promises into the leaden sky. The rhythmic clang of metal on metal forms the heartbeat of this place. At the gates, the guard barely glances at your papers. He knows your face, just as he knows the faces of thousands who pass through these iron gates daily. Inside, the changing room hums with the warmth of too many bodies swapping street clothes for work uniforms. Conversations weave through the steam. Did you hear about the winter boots at GUM? My daughter's fever won't break. If Section 3 exceeds quota, the bonus might cover new curtains. Your locker yields stiff work pants, a coarse shirt, and gear worn smooth by years of use. You change quickly, the machines wait for no one. Tardiness draws the shift supervisor's eye, or worse, the party rep's notice. The factory floor assaults your senses immediately. A wall of noise, hissing steam, screaming metal, smells, hot oil, molten steel, sweat, and controlled chaos. Your station awaits, a lathe that shapes tractor parts. These red-painted behemoths will plow collective farms across the motherland, symbols of agriculture's mechanization. There's pride in this repetitive work, seeing raw metal transform under your hands into something useful, knowing your labor literally feeds the nation. The morning passes in the hypnotic rhythm of skilled hands moving without conscious thought. Your mind wanders. Maybe save for that radio. Maybe climb the factory housing list, though the wait stretches years. Maybe see your name on the top workers' board with its extra rubles and brief glory. Around you, the great Soviet machine churns. Workers become cogs. Quotas become scripture. The plan becomes God. But look closer. Corners cut when materials run short. Quality sacrificed as month-end looms. Production numbers creatively tallied. The unofficial truth beneath the official reports. See also the quiet rebellions. Workers slowing when supervisors look away. Jokes whispered during smoke breaks that mock the system they depend on. The black market networks that keep production moving when official channels fail. This is the dual reality. The bright socialist future blaring from loudspeakers versus the grimy present of make-do and men. The shift horn blares, 10 precious minutes of respite. Some rush to the cafeteria for weak tea and stale pierogi. Others huddle outside, sucking in air less thick with metal filings. From the factory yard, you glimpse the Baltic through industrial haze. Peter the Great's window to the west, now smudged with soot, but still beautiful. Then the horn sounds again, calling you back to your socialist duty. Another tractor part. Another checkbox on the production chart. Another brick in the foundation of a future that never quite arrives. The factory horn's blare signals a seismic shift. Suddenly it's 1962, and the Soviet Union has evolved since Stalin's death. Khrushchev's thaw has subtly loosened the screws of fear, though vigilance still lingers like the smell of cabbage in communal kitchens. People speak more freely now, but I still dart when discussing certain topics in public. You've climbed the ladder after years at the Kirov works. Now a section supervisor at a Moscow television factory, you've traded Leningrad's imperial grace for the capital's electric pulse. More importantly, miracle of miracles, you have your own apartment. Not some communal closet, but a real one-bedroom in a freshly built Khrushchevka, those 5-story concrete boxes mushrooming across Soviet cities. The building is identical to 10,000 others, a human filing cabinet, but inside these standardized walls, miracles unfold. Your own front door, your own bathroom, your own kitchen where no one bangs pots at dawn. After years of communal living, such privacy feels obscenely luxurious. The new morning routine unfolds differently. An alarm clock instead of neighbors' noise, a bathroom available on demand, breakfast prepared at your own pace in your own space. Small freedoms that feel revolutionary. Your commute now involves Moscow's metro, not just transportation, but underground palaces of marble and mosaics. Every chandelier-lit station whispers propaganda. See how the workers' state beautifies even your daily grind? The train arrives precisely on time. This, at least, socialism delivers. You squeeze into the carriage where commuters stand in peculiar silence. No chatting, just newspapers rustling and the occasional cough. Soviet citizens master the art of being alone together. Your factory produces television components, luxury items becoming more common as living standards creep upward. As supervisor, you juggle quotas, worker discipline, and the inevitable crises when machines break down or supplies vanish. Your glass-walled office, modest but symbolic, holds a family photo, stacks of paperwork, and a telephone that connects to the labyrinthine bureaucracy. The morning meeting crackles with tension. Director Volkov, a party man who got his position through political reliability rather than technical skill, announces, Ministry demands a 12% production increase. A groan ripples through the room. Chief Engineer Sakharov, the one who actually understands the machines, rubs his temples. Where are the extra materials? Demands Antonina from assembly. Volkov shrugs. Find reserves. Everyone knows this code. Cut corners, fudge numbers, tap into hidden stockpiles. The Soviet economy runs on such unspoken rules. Official plans bear little relation to how things actually get done. You tour the floor, greeting your 20 workers by name, each with their own quirks. There's Nikolai the gifted drunk, young Galina fresh from technical school, old Fyodor who works at his own glacial pace. 12% increase, comrades, you announce. Eye rolls. Muttered curses. But no real protest. This dance is familiar. Then crisis strikes. Assembly line 3's machine overheats again. Same as last month, grumbles the operator. You send for Pyotr for maintenance, the grizzled wizard who keeps obsolete equipment running years past expiration. Need a part from Kharkov, Pyotr mutters, then winks. But let's see what Sergei's hoarding. Ah, Sergei, king of the unofficial spare parts stash. This shadow economy keeps Soviet industry moving when the official supply chain fails. Everyone plays the game. You helped Kharkov with capacitors last year. Now they'll return the favor. The system's rigid on paper, fluid in practice. Lunch in the cafeteria is starchy fuel, cabbage soup, rubbery kotlety, compote. The supervisor's table buzzes with shop talk and veiled gossip. Did you hear about the Japanese components at Elektrozavod? Truth is, we're 5 years behind the Americans in computers. Information is currency here, traded carefully. Official channels peddle fantasy, truth spreads through whispers. The afternoon drowns in paperwork, triplicate forms, production reports, quotas for quotas. You've learned to split attention, one eye on documents, one on the floor through your glass wall. Every successful Soviet manager masters this duality. A knock interrupts. Dmitry from personnel stands stiffly. The party committee is considering you for advanced training. Your pulse quickens. This could mean ministry work, better housing. But nothing comes free in this system. Comrade Sakharov recommended you, Dmitry adds. But perhaps, lead a political education session? The unspoken bargain. Show more ideological enthusiasm. Climb higher. Not coercion. You could refuse, but the carrot dangles temptingly. I'd be honored, you say, already mentally drafting a speech about technical innovation serving socialist construction. The price of advancement, a few evenings of hypocritical sloganeering. As the shift ends, workers scramble to finish tasks, professional pride and fear of metrics both motivating. The horn sounds. Day shift flows out as evening shift flows in, a changing of the guard with muttered updates. Walking home, you feel the mask loosen. Soon you'll shed your supervisor's skin and become just a person, neighbor, friend, private individual. The system tries to erase this boundary, but it persists in kitchen table conversations and shared jokes, in the quiet space behind closed doors where real life happens. Tonight holds small rebellions, maybe hunt for rumored genes at TSUM, maybe trade books with friends, maybe just savor the miracle of solitude in your very own apartment. The gap between socialist promises and daily compromises stretches wide, but in that gap, people carve out lives worth living. Morning sunlight filters through white curtains in a Moscow apartment. The year is 1968. While students riot in Paris and Vietnam War protests rock America, a new Soviet generation awakens. 13-year-old Natasha stretches in her narrow bed, a luxury her parents never knew at her age. She's grown up in this private apartment with her own tiny bedroom study, a world away from the communal horrors of Stalin's era. Bookshelves hold state-approved children's literature alongside carefully curated Jules Verne and Jack London, windows to foreign worlds with politically sanitized views. On her desk, a half-finished Russian grammar assignment awaits. Soviet education is no joke, with its relentless focus on math, sciences, and proper Russian. English lessons emphasize technical manuals over conversation. What need has a good communist for capitalist small talk? Natasha's school uniform hangs ready, brown dress with black apron, white for special occasions. The red pioneer scarf around her neck marks her membership in the Vladimir Lenin All-Union Pioneer Organization. Not technically mandatory, but non-participation would raise uncomfortable questions about her family's ideological commitment. The scarf isn't just cloth. It's a symbol of belonging to something greater, of participating in the grand Soviet project. She ties it with practiced fingers, the ritual as familiar as her morning braid. In the kitchen, her mother stirs kasha, that ubiquitous Soviet porridge, while her father reads Pravda at the table. The radio murmurs morning exercises followed by news of industrial triumphs and socialist brotherhood. Hurry Natasha, her mother calls, pioneer meeting before class today. These gatherings are the heartbeat of Soviet childhood, patriotic songs, Lenin hagiographies, community service plans. Not indoctrination, the state insists, but civic education teaching collective responsibility. The walk to school passes through Moscow's carefully planned micro-districts, residential blocks clustered with schools and shops. Autumn paints the trees gold as streams of identical uniforms converge on the school's Lenin statue. The pioneer ceremony begins with military precision, flag raising, oath recitation. I solemnly promise to passionately love my Soviet motherland. 30 voices chant in unison, the words so familiar they've lost meaning yet still stir something primal. This collective experience bonds children who'll study, work, and live together under socialism's watchful eye. Classes follow strict rhythms, 45-minute periods, 6-day weeks. Mathematics comes first, taught by a woman whose devotion to algebra is matched only by her contempt for carelessness. Soviet education worships STEM fields, the foundation for the engineers and scientists the planned economy craves. The teaching style is relentlessly traditional. Teacher lectures, students copy, volunteers demonstrate at the blackboard. Rote memorization dominates, especially in history where only the party-approved narrative is tolerated. Yet the intellectual rigor is real. By graduation, Soviet students master calculus and quantum physics concepts many Westerners never encounter. Russian literature class sanctifies Tolstoy and Chekhov as proto-socialist critics of Tsarism. Lunch in the cafeteria reinforces collectivism. Identical meals, borscht, kotlety, compote, served to all regardless of background. Afternoon history lessons preach Marxist-Leninist dogma while PE mixes fitness with pre-military training for boys. After school, Natasha stays for choir practice, patriotic songs for the October Revolution celebration. Other days bring chess club, engineering circles, or community service. These activities serve multiple masters, keeping kids occupied while parents work, spotting talent for state use, and reinforcing socialist values. But many children genuinely enjoy them, a rare space for friendship beyond academic grind. By evening's return, streetlights glow against Moscow's autumn dusk. Her parents won't be home for hours. Soviet kids learn independence early. The empty apartment welcomes her with its familiar smells. A quick snack, then homework, math problems, Pushkin verses to memorize, a geography test on Siberian mineral deposits. When her parents return, they bring treasure, oranges secured through workplace connections. Dinner is simple but precious. Cabbage soup, buckwheat with scraps of meat, black bread. Over the meal, Natasha's father asks about school while her mother mentions winter coat mending. The radio now plays Tchaikovsky instead of news. Evening brings the family's prized possession, television. State channels offer a limited menu, newsreels, classical concerts, approved films. Tonight's documentary glorifies Soviet space triumphs like Gagarin's flight, genuine sources of pride that transcend ideology. Before bed, Natasha lays out tomorrow's uniform and books. On her desk, pioneer hero stories wait, tales of young communists whose bravery offers models for emulation. The narratives are simplistic, but to a child constructing her worldview, powerfully absorbing. 5 years will see Natasha facing university choices dictated by state needs. Her math skills mark her for engineering, personal desires secondary to economic plans. The Komsomol Communist Youth Union will weigh in heavily, its recommendations shaping her future. She'll learn to navigate the system's contradictions, outwardly reciting pioneer odes while privately coveting Beatles records traded underground. But tonight, she's just a Soviet child ending another day in the carefully constructed universe of red scarves, collective rituals, and the quiet space between official dogma and private dreams. The record player hums softly in a Moscow apartment corner, its needle tracing grooves on a Melodia label disc. The year is 1975, and the state-approved Estrada music fills the room, orchestral pop songs celebrating love, nature, and occasional socialist triumphs. Natasha, now 25, lounges in an armchair, savoring this small private moment. Her one-room apartment, allocated after a 2-year wait through the factory housing list, is a monument to Soviet standardization. The same wall unit found in 10 million homes. The identical sofa available in every furniture store. Yet personal touches bloom like wildflowers in concrete cracks. Bookshelves mixing Russian classics with dog-eared foreign translations. A macrame wall hanging from last year's inexplicable craze. potted plant straining toward pale northern light. When the state-approved album ends, Natasha makes her choice with Quiet Rebellion, a bootleg Beatles recording pressed onto salvaged X-ray film. The music on Ribs crackles with poor quality, but the smuggled melodies feel dangerous and delicious. Not quite dissident behavior, but definitely in that gray area Soviet citizens learn to navigate, pushing boundaries without breaking them. The telephone's jangle interrupts, "Hey Jude." It's Olga, her childhood friend turned clinic doctor. Still coming to the Cosmos cinema? They're showing White Son of the Desert again. Soviet cinema operates within tight ideological constraints, yet somehow produces enduring classics. This, Eastern, the USSR's answer to Westerns, about Civil War adventures in Central Asia has achieved cult status. Cosmonauts even watch it pre-launch for luck. Of course, Natasha replies, "Meet at the metro at 6? Maybe try that new cafe afterward if the line isn't insane." Cafes represent Brezhnev Era small luxuries, mediocre coffee and stale pastries served in vaguely European-style settings. Not quite Paris, but a space for fleeting urban sophistication between work and home. The metro ride showcases Soviet grandeur at its finest. Chandelier-lit stations with mosaic tributes to worker heroes offer stark contrast to the shabby streets above. The trains run with Swiss precision, one thing socialism undeniably gets right. Inside the carriage, a peculiar silence reigns. Muscovites have perfected the art of communal solitude. No eye contact, no chit-chat, just newspapers rustling like autumn leaves. The Cosmos Cinema's modernist curves draw crowds despite the weekday evening. At Kopek per ticket prices, culture is practically free, a socialist promise kept. Pre-film newsreels tout industrial achievements in fraternal socialist nations. The audience watches with polite detachment, absorbing propaganda like background radiation. But the movie ignites genuine joy, laughter at the bumbling villain, shared delight in the desert cinematography. For 2 hours, the theater becomes what Soviet ideology dreams of, a true collective, united in cultural experience. Over post-film coffee, weak but warm, Olga drops her voice. Mikhail got tickets for Vysotsky next month. The legendary bard, whose raspy voice songs critique Soviet life without crossing into dissidence, represents another gray area phenomenon. Tolerated but not endorsed, adored by millions but never officially celebrated. Their conversation flows through approved channels. Work complaints, mutual friends, Olga's upcoming Black Sea vacation secured through her clinic's trade union. These state-sanctioned sanatorium holidays mix rest with ideological reinforcement, a classic Soviet two-for-one. As they part under Moscow's endless summer twilight, Natasha's mind already turns towards Sunday, maybe a dacha trip if weather permits, or an apartment gathering with smuggled jazz records. Small pleasures that stitch meaning into the fabric of socialist routine. Evening shadows stretch across Moscow's skyline as the summer sun reluctantly retreats. It's 1983 now, and subtle tremors of change ripple beneath the surface of Soviet society. The interminable Brezhnev era has ended with his death the previous year, and after the brief caretaker leadership of Andropov, the system drifts like a ship with no clear course. In her Moscow apartment, 33-year-old Natasha moves through the familiar rhythms of preparing dinner. The space has accumulated layers of life over the years. Photographs documenting Black Sea vacations and family gatherings. Books acquired through countless trips to state stores and covert exchanges with friends. The kitchen, though still small by Western standards, has become the emotional center of her home. Here, over endless cups of strong tea, truths are spoken that would never pass lips in public spaces. She checks her refrigerator, the hum of its motor a constant background noise, surveying ingredients acquired through various channels. Some from state stores after interminable queues, others from the farmers market, where collective farm workers sell surplus, a few precious items obtained through workplace distributions. Cooking in the Soviet Union is always an exercise in improvisation, a daily negotiation between desire and availability. The telephone's shrill ring interrupts her preparations. It's Olga, her voice crackling through the aging line. Don't forget the sour cream for tonight. Such reminders are necessary. Every hostess knows a gathering's success depends on securing scarce ingredients. Tonight's gathering follows the pattern perfected over years of friendship. The guests arrive bearing their contributions. Mikhail with a bottle of Soviet champagne, sweet sparkling wine that bears only passing resemblance to the French original. Victor clutching a jar of pickles from his mother's dacha. Irina with a precious packet of real coffee obtained through medical contacts. Coats are hung in the cramped entryway. Outdoor shoes exchanged for house slippers, a universal Soviet ritual. Despite the presence of a formal living room, everyone instinctively crowds into the kitchen, drawn by its warmth and intimacy. The table groans under simple but carefully prepared dishes. Olivier salad, that ubiquitous Soviet party staple, pickled vegetables, black bread, and the prized sausage obtained through special channels. Conversation begins with the usual exchanges: children's school achievements, workplace gossip, the latest domestic crises. Victor complains about the ancient equipment in his research institute. We're supposed to be developing cutting-edge technology with machines older than my father, he grumbles. The others nod. Every Soviet professional knows this disconnect between official rhetoric and daily reality. The talk turns to culture, always a safer ground than outright politics. Have you read Trifonov's new novel? Irina asks. The way he writes about Moscow intelligentsia, it's almost. She trails off, the unspoken honest hanging in the air. Books pass hand to hand in this society, forming chains of trust and shared understanding that bypass official distribution systems. As the evening progresses and the vodka bottle empties, the discussion grows more candid. Mikhail recounts a joke circulating at his factory. Brezhnev, Andropov, and Chernenko walk into a bar. The bartender says, "Sorry, we don't serve breakfast." The laughter is a release valve for frustrations that can't be expressed directly. The television mumbles in the background. The evening news program Vremya, with its predictable parade of smiling workers exceeding quotas and Western imperialist villains. No one pays it much mind, though its images form the shared visual language of their lives. Later, they move to the living room where Natasha's most prized possession, a reel-to-reel tape recorder obtained through great effort, plays a scratchy recording of Vysotsky. The outlaw bard's raspy voice fills the room with songs that capture the absurdity and beauty of Soviet life. This is the soundtrack of their generation, neither fully approved nor outright banned, existing in the carefully maintained gray zone where most authentic Soviet culture resides. As the guests depart into the Moscow night, embracing with promises of future gatherings, Natasha is left with the familiar post-party tasks: washing dishes by hand, no machines here, returning the apartment to order, saving every leftover scrap. The rituals of domestic life continue, unchanged by the political tremors shaking the foundations of their society. The first light of dawn filters through Natasha's bedroom curtains on a Moscow morning in 1985. Something electric hangs in the air. Change is coming, though nobody yet understands its shape. Mikhail Gorbachev has just been named General Secretary, and already the words glasnost and perestroika whisper through intellectual circles like coded messages. Natasha's morning routine remains unchanged on the surface. The same compact kitchen where she boils water for tea, the same radio murmuring state-approved news. But the broadcast carries a new tone today. Where Brezhnev's speeches droned with bureaucratic inertia, this new voice speaks of acceleration and openness. She pauses, teaspoon hovering over her cup. Could this be more than just another empty slogan? At the Research Institute where she works, the usual rhythms of Soviet science continue. Morning meetings about production quotas, the endless paperwork that documents everything and accomplishes nothing. But in the cafeteria, conversations take on a new edge. Did you hear? Her colleague Lev whispers over watery soup. They're allowing Sakharov to return to Moscow. The dissident physicist's exile had been a grim reminder of the consequences of speaking out. If even he can come back, the implications hang unspoken between them. Lev's eyes dart toward the corner where the party informant usually sits. Old habits of caution die hard in a country where walls have ears. But the informant seems distracted today, flipping through a magazine with unusual disinterest. After work, Natasha walks past newsstands where the usual bland headlines are being replaced by shocking frankness. Alcoholism crisis in Siberia, construction delays at Minsk factory. The state publishing houses, so long mouthpieces of propaganda, are suddenly printing exposes on corruption and inefficiency. It's as if the entire country is waking from a long, stagnant sleep. That evening, her friend Olga arrives breathless at her doorstep, clutching a contraband copy of Novy Mir containing Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, previously banned, now circulating in samizdat copies. Can you believe it? Olga's eyes shine with nervous excitement. They're saying this might be published officially. Natasha's fingers tremble as she turns the onion-skin pages. These are the stories her parents' generation only whispered. The arrests in midnight hours, the frozen labor camps, the systematic cruelty of Stalin's regime. To see them in print, even unofficially, feels dangerous and exhilarating. The television, long a source of mind-numbing propaganda, suddenly broadcasts debates where party officials are actually questioned. The first time Natasha sees a factory manager stammer under a reporter's probing, she nearly spills her tea. The rules are changing, but to what end? At the weekend, she visits her parents' apartment. Her father sits red-faced at the kitchen table, slamming his palm on an open newspaper. This is madness. They're undermining everything we built. The paper shows footage of Politburo members being grilled about economic failures. Unthinkable just months ago. Her mother quietly stirs soup at the stove. Maybe it's good they're admitting mistakes, she ventures. How can we fix what we won't acknowledge? The generational divide yawns wide in that moment, between those who remember Stalin's terror and those who only know stagnation. Walking home through Moscow's spring evening, Natasha passes a group of young people clustered around a guitar. They're singing Beatles songs, not furtively in someone's kitchen, but openly in a public square. A policeman walks by without stopping them. She pauses by a newly opened cooperative cafe, one of Gorbachev's economic experiments. The prices are outrageous by Soviet standards, but the coffee smells like real Brazilian beans. Inside, two men argue passionately about economic reform. In the corner, someone reads a foreign newspaper. Everything is shifting, but the destination remains unclear. The certainties of Soviet life, the guaranteed jobs, the predictable shortages, the clear lines between acceptable and forbidden, are dissolving like ice in spring thaw. That night, lying in bed, Natasha realizes with a start that for the first time in her life, she can't predict where she'll be in 5 years. The thought is terrifying and thrilling. The Moscow air smells different in 1987, less like diesel fumes and stale ideology, more like uncertainty and, bizarrely, fresh pizza. Natasha pauses outside one of the new cooperative restaurants, its neon sign flickering like a capitalist heartbeat in the socialist night. 2 years into Gorbachev's reforms, the cityscape transforms daily, not in grand gestures, but in small, startling details. At her research institute, the changes cut deeper. The morning meeting no longer begins with rote recitations of production quotas. Instead, Director Petrov, a party man who's miraculously grown a personality, actually asks for suggestions. "We're implementing Kozraskiet," he announces, explaining the new self-financing system where factories must turn a profit. The term hangs in the air, foreign and thrilling. Profit? In a socialist enterprise? Natasha's co-worker Yuri leans over, his breath smelling of the Armenian cognac he's taken to drinking since restrictions loosened. "They want us to think like capitalists but still sing the Internationale," he mutters. "Let's see how long this tightrope holds." The cafeteria buzzes with unprecedented debates. Engineers argue about a magazine article comparing Japanese and Soviet management styles. Unthinkable just years ago when such comparisons automatically favored the USSR. The old party informant sits alone now, his notebook empty, his relevance evaporating in the new climate of openness. After work, Natasha navigates a city becoming unfamiliar. State stores still dominate, their half-empty shelves now mocked by new cooperative shops where quality goods appear, for those who can afford 5 times the price. She passes a crowd gathered around a street vendor selling Levi's jeans and cassette tapes of Madonna. A policeman watches indifferently. The black market has come above ground, wearing designer labels. At home, her television delivers nightly astonishments. Historical documentaries expose Stalin's crimes in graphic detail. Talk shows feature formerly imprisoned dissidents debating KGB officials. The screen flashes with footage of protests in the Baltics. Not censored, not condemned, just reported. Each broadcast leaves her equal parts exhilarated and unnerved. How far will this go? Her parents' generation reacts with visceral pain. They're tearing down everything we sacrificed for. Her father rages during Sunday dinner, waving a newspaper that quotes Trotsky, previously a non-person in Soviet historiography. Her mother quietly clears the plates, her silence more telling than her husband's outbursts. The contradictions multiply. At the House of Scientists, Natasha attends a lecture where an economist praises market mechanisms. In Leninist terms, of course. The speaker walks a semantic tightrope, advocating capitalist tools while insisting they serve socialist goals. Afterward, over Georgian wine, now freely available, academics whisper about Poland's solidarity movement and whether similar changes could come here. One evening, Olga brings astonishing news. They're allowing private businesses, real ones, not just cooperatives. They sit in Natasha's kitchen, passing a bottle of Lithuanian vodka, no longer hidden in a cupboard, trying to comprehend the seismic shift. My cousin is opening a photography studio, Olga continues. He's hiring employees and everything. It's like an EP. Natasha supplies, referencing Lenin's 1920s quasi-capitalist experiment. The historical parallel hangs between them. The original NEP ended in Stalinist terror. Summer brings more surreal transformations. Rock concerts in Gorky Park. Foreign tourists roaming freely. American films playing at the Udarnik Cinema, not as anti-imperialist critiques, but as entertainment. Natasha finds herself standing in line for a screening of Back to the Future, sandwiched between teenagers in Chicago Bulls jackets and babushkas shaking their heads at the decadence. At work, the reforms bite harder. The Institute must now compete for contracts. Colleagues who once mocked capitalist notions study business German in evening classes. The first layoffs come quietly, not the old Stalinist disappearances, but pink slips delivered with severance pay. The guaranteed job, that cornerstone of Soviet life, is crumbling. Walking home past newly vibrant street markets, Natasha realizes with a start that she's started thinking in terms of personal opportunity rather than collective duty. The realization shocks her. Who is she becoming in this new, uncertain world? That night, she digs out her old pioneer scarf from a childhood box. The red fabric feels impossibly distant, like an artifact from a lost civilization. Outside her window, Moscow pulses with new energy. Car horns, laughter, the distant thump of Western music. The future has arrived, but its shape remains unclear. The Moscow winter of 1991 bites with a peculiar ferocity, the cold seeming to seep not just into bones, but into the very fabric of society. Natasha stands at her kitchen window watching snow blanket the city, her breath fogging the glass. The radio babbles continuously these days, no longer the measured tones of state announcements, but a chaotic cacophony of competing voices. Glasnost has birthed 1,000 independent stations, each peddling its own version of truth. At the Research Institute, now rebranded as Tech Progress LLC, in a clumsy attempt at capitalist chic, the changes accelerate beyond recognition. The bust of Lenin that guarded the entrance for decades has been replaced by a Western-style reception desk staffed by a young woman with pink hair. Director Petrov, that old party warhorse, now wears Italian suits and talks about maximizing shareholder value, though no one is entirely sure who the shareholders actually are. The cafeteria serves the same dismal kotlety, but the conversations have transformed completely. Colleagues debate whether to accept the new stock options, whatever those are, or demand cash payments. The word privatization hangs over everything like a sword. Will the institute be sold to foreign investors? To the managers? Or perhaps back to the state in some bizarre loop? Walking home past Pushkin Square, Natasha navigates a landscape that changes daily. The old GUM department store now houses Western boutiques where fur-coated new Russians flaunt wads of dollar bills. But just blocks away, pensioners line up at state stores with ration coupons, their life savings rendered worthless by hyperinflation. A new breed of street vendors sells everything from pirated Microsoft software to Makarov pistols, their shouts blending into an anarchic symphony. Her apartment has become an accidental time capsule of the Soviet era. The same furniture, the same books, even the same rotary phone. Yet the world outside its walls feels increasingly alien. The television offers a circus of contradictions. Communist hardliners warning of counter-revolution, radical reformers calling for shock therapy, Baltic leaders declaring independence, all broadcast and censored for the first time in Soviet history. One evening, Olga arrives with a bottle of Finnish vodka and shocking news. They're saying the party may lose its constitutional monopoly on power. The words hang between them, unimaginable just years earlier. They drink to the absurdity, to the terror, to the exhilarating uncertainty of it all. The phone rings incessantly, friends reporting rumors of coup plots, of KGB resignations, of military divisions declaring neutrality. August arrives like a fever dream. Natasha wakes to radio announcements that Gorbachev has been detained at his dacha. Tanks roll into Moscow, not for the May Day parade, but to seize control. The television plays Swan Lake on loop, that eerie Soviet signal of crisis. She peers through her curtains at young men building barricades near the White House, their faces alight with desperate courage. For 3 surreal days, the world holds its breath. Natasha and Olga huddle by the radio, following events through crackling static. The putsch collapses under its own incompetence, the tanks retreat, and Yeltsin climbs atop one to declare a new Russia. When Gorbachev returns, a diminished figure now, it's clear something fundamental has broken. Autumn brings the final unraveling. At work, the researchers receive vouchers supposedly representing their share of national wealth. Pieces of paper no one quite understands how to use. The cafeteria talk turns to emigration, to Israel, to America, anywhere with stability. Director Petrov disappears abruptly, rumored to have taken company assets to Cyprus. December 25th dawns cold and quiet. Natasha watches on television as the Soviet flag is lowered over the Kremlin for the last time. There's no ceremony, no grand speeches, just a handful of officials going through bureaucratic motions. The mighty USSR expires not with a bang, but with a paperwork shuffle. That night, she digs out her old Soviet passport, soon to be a relic. The hammer and sickle embossed on its cover seem like artifacts from another lifetime. Outside, fireworks explode over Moscow, some in celebration, some in mourning, most just from people glad to have survived the chaos. The questions hang unspoken in the frozen air. What comes next? Who are we now? The answers, like the new Russia itself, remain formless and raw, waiting to be shaped by forces no one yet comprehends. The Moscow spring of 1992 smells of wet asphalt and unfiltered capitalism. Natasha walks past the newly renamed McDonald's Pushkin Square, where a queue snakes around the block, not for bread or medicine as in Soviet times, but for Big Macs and strawberry milkshakes. She clutches her fraying string bag, now an antiquated relic in this world of plastic shopping bags advertising foreign brands. Her apartment, still stubbornly filled with Soviet-era furniture, has become a museum of discontinued ideologies. The bookshelves hold marks alongside newly acquired manuals on marketing and English grammar. The television, once a conduit for state propaganda, now blares MTV Russia between commercials for Snickers and washing machines that promise to liberate women from domestic slavery. At what was once her research institute, the changes are vertiginous. Tech Progress LLC has been bought by a Finnish conglomerate. The new managers speak of downsizing and lean production, euphemisms that taste bitter in Natasha's mouth. Her department shrank from 30 to 5. Those remaining earned triple their old salaries in dollar equivalents, while the dismissed haunt underpasses selling their family heirlooms. The cafeteria no longer serves subsidized meals, just a vending machine dispensing overpriced Snickers. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Conversations revolve around impossible choices. Should I take the severance package and sell jeans at Lesniki Market? Is my engineering degree worth anything now? The old party informant, spotted last week driving a Mercedes, reportedly runs a protection racket for kiosk owners. Moscow transforms at warp speed. Streets once named after revolutionaries now bear czarist titles. The hammer and sickle chiseled from building facades leave ghostly outlines, like amputated limbs. Natasha passes a former pioneer's palace reborn as a casino, its neon lights reflecting in puddles of melted snow. Inside, the new elite, men in leather jackets counting $100 bills, gamble where children once pledged allegiance to Lenin. At home, her parents struggle with the new reality. Her father's pension, once adequate if modest, now barely covers a week's groceries. Her mother secretly barters her silver spoon collection at the flea market. Their Sunday dinners have grown tense. Her father rails against the criminal oligarchs, while Natasha's nephew Sasha, just 16, dreams of joining them. Uncle Lenin's dead. The boy declares between bites of Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's dollar time now. The television news offers no comfort. Hyperinflation devouring savings, ethnic violence erupting in the Caucasus, American advisors swarming ministries like missionaries converting heathens. Yet between the crises flicker tantalizing possibilities. Foreign universities offering scholarships, catalogs of consumer goods previously unimaginable, travel agencies advertising package tours to places once forbidden. One evening, flipping through channels, Natasha stumbles upon a rebroadcast of the 1975 Soviet classic The Irony of Fate. The familiar scenes of socialist life, communal baths, standardized apartments, the comforting dysfunction of the planned economy, strike her with unexpected nostalgia. She finds herself weeping for a world that frustrated her daily, but whose rules she understood perfectly. The phone rings, Olga, sounding breathless. They're hiring at the new IBM office. They need Russian engineers who can learn programming. Natasha listens, twisting the phone cord around her finger. The salary quoted could buy a year's worth of groceries. The catch? She'd have to start as an intern at 42 years old, taking orders from American managers half her age. She walks to the balcony, lighting a Marlboro, no more foul Prima cigarettes. The city sprawls before her, a chaotic mix of construction cranes and crumbling Brezhnev Era blocks, of neon billboards and babushkas sweeping sidewalks with birch brooms. Somewhere out there, a new Russia is being born in the messy collision of gangster capitalism and stubborn Soviet habits. The question hangs in the tobacco-scented air: adapt or perish. She grinds out the cigarette, watching the ember die. Tomorrow, she'll call Olga back. Tomorrow, she'll buy an English textbook. Tomorrow, she'll become someone new. But tonight, just for tonight, she allows herself to mourn. For the lost certainties, for the broken promises, for the peculiar security of knowing exactly where your place was in an unjust but predictable world. Outside her window, a car alarm wails through the Moscow night. The soundtrack of this strange new epoch where everything is possible and nothing is certain. The Moscow summer of 1994 hums with the chaotic energy of a society reinventing itself daily. Natasha steps out of the IBM office, her third-floor walk-up in a renovated Stalinist building now housing the American tech giant's Russian headquarters. The elevator, broken since Brezhnev's time, has finally been repaired, its chrome surfaces polished to capitalist sheen. She adjusts the lapels of her new blazer, purchased at the Italian boutique where a month's salary vanished in one shopping trip, and breathes in air thick with car exhaust and opportunity. Her transformation still startles her sometimes. The IBM ID card in her pocket bears her title, Senior Systems Analyst, in English first, Cyrillic second. Her workdays now revolve around concepts unheard of in her Soviet education: profit margins, client satisfaction, performance reviews. The cafeteria serves sushi alongside pelmeni, a culinary metaphor for Russia's awkward globalization. Moscow races ahead at dizzying speed. Where empty storefronts stood 2 years ago, Western brands now jostle for space. Benetton beside Babushka's Pickles, Nike sharing walls with Soviet-era photo studios. The streets teem with a new breed of Muscovite. Young men in leather jackets barking into brick-sized mobile phones, their girlfriends tottering on impossibly high heels bought with dollars earned in mysterious enterprises. Yet the past lingers stubbornly. On her walk home, Natasha passes the same bread queue she stood in as a child, now comprised mostly of pensioners clutching weathered ration coupons in a country that officially abandoned them. An old woman sells wilted flowers outside the metro, her eyes holding generations of hardship. The contrast jarred daily. A gleaming BMW nearly runs over a veteran selling his medals on the pavement. Her apartment remains an island of continuity in the storm. The same books line the shelves, though now joined by English business manuals. The television still occupies its honored corner, but instead of Swan Lake interruptions, it broadcasts Mexican soap operas dubbed into Russian with jarring enthusiasm. Even her mother's samovar holds its place of pride, though Natasha now fills it with imported Earl Grey rather than Soviet caravan tea. Olga visits one evening, bearing a bottle of French wine that costs more than their former monthly salaries. They toast to surviving the transition, though the wine turns to vinegar in Natasha's mouth when Olga mentions their old colleague Victor, now driving a taxi after the Institute's collapse. He says we were lucky, Olga murmurs, staring into her glass. At least we didn't end up like Fyodor. She doesn't finish. They both know about Fyodor's suicide last winter. The phone rings, her nephew Sasha, breathless with excitement. Aunt Natasha, I got into MGIMO. The prestigious institute that once groomed Soviet diplomats now trains Russia's new capitalist elite. His tuition fees, astronomical by old standards, will be paid by an export-import firm run by his girlfriend's father. Natasha congratulates him while quietly calculating how many IBM paychecks it would take to cover such costs. Weekends bring uneasy family gatherings. Her father, increasingly frail, still rails against the thieves who destroyed our great country, while Sasha counters with free market dogma learned from American textbooks. Natasha mediates these battles, understanding both perspectives too well. Her father's grief for the world he built, her nephew's hunger for the world rushing in to replace it. One Sunday, sorting through old boxes, she finds her Komsomol membership card. The red booklet with its golden emblem seems like an artifact from another civilization. She traces the faded photo of her 18-year-old self, that earnest young communist who believed in the radiant future. What would that girl think of the woman she's become? Working for an American corporation, wearing French perfume, dreaming of vacationing in Italy. The answer comes unexpectedly clear. That idealistic girl would be disappointed. And perhaps, Natasha realizes with a pang, justifiably so. For all its faults, the system she grew up in promised something beyond personal enrichment. What does she believe in now? The question unsettles her more than any economic shock. As summer fades into autumn, Natasha walks past the newly reopened Christ the Savior Cathedral, raised by Stalin, now resurrected in gleaming marble as a symbol of Russia's reclaimed identity. The golden domes catch the afternoon light, dazzling after decades of Soviet gray. Inside, she lights a candle, not quite sure who she's praying to, only that she needs to mark this moment between what was and what will be. Stepping back into the sunlight, she checks her Swiss-made watch, an extravagance she still feels guilty about. There's time before her English lesson. She could grab a cappuccino at the new Italian cafe or browse the imported bookshop that just opened near Arbat. The choices, so plentiful they sometimes paralyze her, are the gifts and burdens of this new world. A breeze carries the scent of baking bread from a nearby bakery, the same smell that filled Moscow in her childhood, though the bread now costs 50 times more. Some things endure beneath the surface changes. Natasha straightens her shoulders, adjusts her briefcase. and walks toward her future, whoever she's becoming in this strange new Russia. The Moscow winter of 1999 howls with a bitterness that seems to echo the national mood. Natasha pulls her cashmere coat tighter, a luxury purchase from her IBM years that now feels vaguely shameful, as she navigates icy sidewalks past currency exchange booths displaying dizzying numbers. The ruble has collapsed again, wiping out her carefully saved nest egg in one brutal August swoop. Her apartment bears the scars of recent history. The English business manuals gather dust, their optimistic advice rendered absurd by Russia's reality. The television, once a portal to exciting foreign programming, now mostly broadcasts grim-faced news anchors reporting on bombings in the Caucasus and political chaos in the Kremlin. Only the samovar remains unchanged, its brass surface reflecting the flickering light of emergency candles during yet another power outage. IBM is gone, its Moscow office shuttered during the '98 financial crisis. At 47, Natasha finds herself part of Russia's new lost generation, too young to retire, too old to be desirable in this brutal new job market. She survives on freelance translation work, mostly for shady import-export firms that pay in cash and disappear overnight. The city around her has grown harder, sharper. The Western boutiques that sprouted so hopefully in the early '90s are closing one by one, replaced by armored storefronts selling Chinese electronics and Turkish leather jackets. The new Russians of just a few years ago have either fled to London or morphed into something darker, silent men in black Mercedes with tinted windows. Olga visits less often now, consumed with caring for her ailing mother and working double shifts at the underfunded hospital. When they do meet, their conversations circle the same questions like wolves around a dying fire. How did we get here? What comes next? There are no answers, only the shared memory of that brief, bright moment when everything seemed possible. One frozen February morning, Natasha stands in line at the post office to collect her mother's pension, the meager sum now vital to both their survivals. The queue moves with glacial slowness, filled with elderly Muscovites clutching worn savings books from the Sberbank. Ahead of her, an old man in a threadbare military coat sways slightly on his feet. When he collapses, the reaction is horrifying in its practiced efficiency. Someone checks his pulse, someone else calls for the underfunded ambulance that may or may not come. The rest shuffle forward to close the gap in the line. Survival, Natasha realizes with a chill, has become a solitary sport in this new Russia. At home, sorting through her father's papers after his funeral the previous autumn, she finds his Communist Party membership card tucked between faded photographs of May Day parades. The red booklet is surprisingly heavy in her hand, its gold embossing still bright after all these years. She traces the dates with her finger, 1946 to 1991, the lifespan of the Soviet experiment neatly bracketed. What strange alchemy of hope and terror, of sacrifice and betrayal, these cardboard pages contain. The television buzzes with news of Yeltsin's latest reshuffle, the umpteenth prime minister appointed in as many months. The camera cuts to the Duma, where communist deputies in outdated suits shout at free market reformers in imported ties. The spectacle would be comic if the stakes weren't so dire. Outside the ornate chamber, the country crumbles. Her nephew Sasha calls from New York, where he's studying at Columbia on some oligarch-funded scholarship. His American-accented Russian grates on her ears as he enthuses about hedge funds and IPOs. You should come visit, Aunt Natasha. See how real capitalism works. She murmurs noncommittally, staring at the stack of unpaid utility bills on her table. That night, digging through a cupboard for extra blankets during another heating system failure, she unearths an old shoebox of childhood mementos. Beneath yellowed pioneer certificates and faded young technician badges lies her most subversive teenage possession, a bootleg cassette of Western rock music recorded on X-ray film. She smiles, remembering how they called it music on ribs, how dangerous it felt to listen to those forbidden chords. The cassette player is long gone, but she holds the flimsy plastic up to the light anyway. The ghostly image of someone's ribcage, still faintly visible beneath the magnetic tape, strikes her as oddly poetic. The human body pressed into service as a medium for rebellion, just as their entire generation had been pressed into service for history's experiments. Outside, snow begins to fall, softening the edges of the broken playground where Soviet children once played. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wails, the eternal soundtrack of post-Soviet nights. Natasha wraps herself in a blanket and watches the flakes swirl in the orange glow of streetlights, wondering if this is how empires truly end. Not with grand explosions, but with a slow settling of accounts, a quiet balancing of books, both economic and spiritual. The 21st century looms just weeks away, promising either renewal or further collapse. Natasha finds herself too tired to care which. Let the young fight those battles. Her war is over. She closes her eyes and drifts into sleep, lulled by the whispering snow and the faint, persistent ache of all that's been lost and found and lost again in this endless Russian winter. The Moscow spring of 2007 arrives with a deceptive gentleness. Cherry blossoms scattering like pink snow over streets, now paved with oil money. Natasha watches from her balcony as a gleaming black Maybach glides past the playground where Soviet children once played. The same spot where a decade earlier she'd seen drug dealers conducting business openly. The city has been scrubbed clean for its latest incarnation, though the soap used was petrodollars and the dirt merely displaced, not erased. At 55, she's become something rare in this new Russia, a survivor who's navigated every twist of the serpentine path from Brezhnev to Putin without losing her footing. The tiny translation agency she started in her apartment during the lean years now occupies proper offices near Patriarch's Ponds, employing 3 former scientists who, like her, found their expertise worthless in the new economy, but their linguistic skills marketable. Her apartment has undergone subtle upgrades. The Soviet furniture supplemented by an IKEA bookshelf, the samovar now flanked by an Italian espresso machine. Only the books remain unchanged, their spines bearing witness to ideological earthquakes, marks beside Milton Friedman, Soviet engineering manuals alongside business English for professionals. Olga visits more often these days, her hospital finally receiving proper funding under Putin's healthcare reforms. They drink Armenian cognac, no longer a luxury, and reminisce about their youth with the selective memory of middle age, the hardships softened by time, the small joys burnished to a golden sheen. Remember when we thought perestroika would bring paradise? Olga laughs, swirling her glass. Natasha smiles, but doesn't mention the pensioners she still sees digging through trash bins near the metro. The city pulses with new energy. Restaurants serving fusion cuisine where Stalovaya's once doled out identical meals. Art galleries exhibiting works that would have landed artists in psychiatric wards under Brezhnev. The internet cafes humming with young Russians video chatting with friends in London and New York, their lives unconstrained by old borders. Yet beneath the glittering surface, old ghosts linger. When Natasha's team translates documents for a British firm investigating Russian corporate takeovers, they develop an unspoken system. 3 versions of every document. What the client wants to hear, what the documents actually say, and what everyone understands to be the truth. This linguistic ballet would feel familiar to any Soviet citizen. One May evening, walking home past the newly gilded Christ the Savior Cathedral, Natasha notices a group of teenagers taking selfies against its domes. Their clothes scream Western brands, their phones the latest models. One girl wears a red scarf tied jauntily around her neck. Not a Pioneer kerchief, but some designer accessory. The sight triggers a memory so vivid it stops her breath. Herself at 13, tying that scarf with solemn ceremony before school. The past presses in unexpectedly these days. A whiff of certain pipe tobacco recalls her father. The opening chords of an old Soviet film song bring back communal viewings in packed theaters. Even the taste of Stolichnaya vodka, now repackaged for global markets, carries echoes of kitchen table conversations that shaped her worldview. Her nephew Sasha returns from America with an MBA and a hedge fund job, his American accent now fully overriding his Russian cadences. Over dinner at a sushi restaurant, the same spot where a bread queue once stretched around the block, he lectures about Russia's emerging market potential. Natasha picks at her salmon rolls, wondering when food became so complicated in this city that once considered oranges a luxury. Don't you see, Aunt Natasha? Sasha enthuses. We're finally normal. She nearly chokes on her green tea. Normal? This Russia of oligarchs and oil derricks, of resurrected churches and resurgent KGB alumni? This schizophrenic nation that erased 70 years of history only to selectively resurrect czarist symbols? Later, sorting through old papers, she finds a yellowed Pravda from 1985. The ink so faded the headlines are barely legible. Gorbachev's hopeful face smiles up at her, frozen in time before everything unraveled. She traces the newsprint with fingers that remember handling such papers with reverence, when the party line shaped reality itself. The television murmurs in the background, a documentary about the Soviet space program. Not the old heroic narratives, but something more nuanced, acknowledging both the achievements and the Gulag labor that made them possible. This new Russia picks through its past like a thrift shopper, keeping some items, discarding others, without much regard for historical continuity. Outside her window, Moscow glitters, a city rebuilt with oil wealth and amnesia. The playground where Soviet children played now hosts the offspring of investment bankers. The communal apartments are being converted into luxury lofts. Even the language has changed, peppered with English loanwords that would have sent Soviet grammarians to early graves. Natasha pours herself a drink, single malt scotch now, not the harsh vodka of her youth. She toasts the ghosts in her apartment, her parents, her old colleagues, the earnest young communist she once was. The living room walls bear photographs spanning the chaos, her pioneer days, the wild 90s, her modest business success today. A life lived across 3 distinct Russias, with whiplash transitions between each. She wonders sometimes what her story means, if it means anything at all beyond the basic human struggle to adapt. History used to feel like something solid you could push against. Now it's quicksilver, changing shape each time you try to grasp it. The scotch burns pleasantly as midnight approaches. Somewhere in the city, a new generation of Muscovites parties in exclusive clubs, their futures bright with possibility. Somewhere else, an old woman heats soup over a single burner, her pension stretched impossibly thin. And here, in this quiet apartment between past and present, Natasha closes her eyes and lets the hum of the refrigerator, finally reliable after all these years, lull her toward sleep.